We're making earrings today. Stay tuned, I'll tell you a little bit about what these earrings are for. So this video is documenting me making a collection of earrings for the brand LLA. LLA is a Melbourne small business. Last September, Alice ordered some Daisy earrings to go with her new collection. So here in this image, you can see the model is wearing two of the larger Daisies. The great thing about this order is that Alice will be doing the earring fittings, so I just have to make the actual earrings themselves, and then she'll be able to go through and put together the ones that are going to work well for her collection. I've added in all of the timestamps if you want to go through and fast forward or get to a different stage, just check the description, and all of the brands and everything that I've used throughout this video are also linked below. Let's get started. So to get started, we're rolling out our slab. Now, each time I roll over it, I'm pushing hard. The aim here is to compress the clay. So when you're rolling out a slab, not only are you pushing down on the clay, you're also stretching it out. One of the things that you're doing is compressing the clay. This is important because we don't want any air bubbles getting in, because that will mean we'll get cracks. We also want to try and keep the clay even. By flipping up the clay and putting it over to the other side, that's going to ensure that your clay is nice and even as you go. By rolling out your slab onto a piece of fabric, it means that you're going to be able to lift your clay each time. This is especially important if you are wanting to get it nice and thin. You can also put another piece of fabric on top if you're getting a little bit of friction between your rolling pin and your clay. It's also good to remember that your clay will get a little bit thirsty, so spray it with water as you go. This will help with stretching it out. Then I'm going over it with a rib tool just to compress it even further. I do this on both sides. The purpose of the rib tool is to show us if there's any air bubbles. So what you'll notice when you put your rib tool over the top, that these little bubbles will kind of pop up on the surface, and what you can do is use your needle tool to just poke them and then smooth them back over with your rib tool. I do this on both sides. So I do my rib tool on one side with a little bit of water, then I flip it, and then I do it on the other side, and then I'm ready to start putting my template on. If you're doing earrings, it's always a good idea just to check the thickness. If your clay is too thick, it will be very heavy to wear, so getting it as thin as possible is important. So I'm starting by putting my little template on, and then I just cut around the outside of the template. You can do this without a template, but I have found that you will get a better result if you've got a little paper template or cardboard template. Your edges won't be as fuzzy. For the circle, I use a cookie cutter style tool. You can buy these off any polymer clay earring website. They are way quicker to use if you're doing a basic shape. Then I'm going through, while my pieces are still quite wet, they're firmed up a little bit. They're still a little bit malleable though. So I'm going through with a wet paintbrush, and I pretty much just brush over the outside areas. So I do the front, the back, and all of the edges. This gives you a chance to refine the piece. To cut out the holes, I use a drill bit. I then brush over it with my paintbrush, and then when I'm brushing it gets a little bit clogged in the hole, I'll use the drill bit one more time. Then when all of my pieces are finished, they've dried off a little bit, they've been smoothed over, I pop them in another vessel that's going to be going in the bisque fire. This means that I don't have to handle them as much. A few things that I check for here is, number one, if my earrings are supposed to be flat, I make sure that they're flat before they start drying, so I sit them on a flat surface. Number two, when I'm putting them in, I'm trying to handle them the least amount as possible. By putting them into a vessel that's going into the bisque as well, it means all I have to do is carry that vessel to the kiln, pop it in, and then I don't have to touch them until I pull them out. So handle them the least amount as possible. Number one thing to remember when you're sanding is you need to sand with water. If you're not sanding with water, you need to wear a dust mask. I have talked about this in previous videos. Clay dust has got silica in it, and you can actually get silica poisoning if you're exposed to this over time. Alternatively, you can wet sand, which basically stops the water from going up into the air. So I'm using this block that I got from North Pottery Supplies. It's just a general sanding block that's got like a diamond grit. There are a few other different brands of this that you can get. I will link them below. But basically, I sand both the front and the back after I've sprayed it with water. I also have a Chucks cloth next to me just to wipe off any of the excess dust or residue, which is also wet. The best thing about these blocks when they're nice thick blocks is that if you have got a more complex design, like for example this daisy design, I was actually able to use the edge of the block to go through and sand down those parts. When we're using underglaze, one of the things that it's important to remember is that we're not just painting it on, it's actually getting absorbed into the clay. So if you have just sanded your pieces and they are very wet, it's not going to absorb properly. What I did for these ones, because if you've watched my other videos, you know I'm a little bit impatient, I actually put them in the oven at a really, really low temperature just to get the moisture out. And what that will mean is that the clay can absorb the underglaze quickly and that it will dry. If your ceramic piece, and this goes for any piece as well, like mugs or vases, but if you've just wet it, and you've put glaze on it and for some reason it's not drying, like it takes ages and ages to dry, maybe it's been 3 hours and you can still see that the glaze hasn't dried yet. The reason for that is because your clay is actually just full of water. It took me a while to learn that. Essentially, when you're underglazing or glazing, you need to make sure your pieces are dry so that chemicals that are in those glazes are going to be absorbed, and this is going to stop glaze defects from happening. So I start with painting where the center of the daisy is going to be for each one. I've got all these earrings laid out in color sections. So the bottom section is going to be white speckled with a yellow center. The middle section is going to be white speckled, and at the moment it will be a yellow center as a placeholder, but they'll actually be gold lustered later on. I'll put a link to my video for the gold luster so you can see how they turn out. And then the top section is going to all be pink petals with a yellow center. I've also got a group of daisies up in the top corner that you'll notice, which are actually just spares. And the purpose of that is because it's a wholesale order, I don't want to have to go back to the very start if I make a mistake. So I'll fire all of these, and if any of them don't work out, I can use my spares that have already been bisqued, quickly glaze them with whatever color they need to be, and then put them through the kiln to ensure that the person that I'm making them for will still get them on time. So usually I'll do 2 thin layers of underglaze for each color. I'm going to be using Northcote Pottery's clear gloss glaze. This is the one that I generally use the most of, so I'm pretty much just painting a layer on top. Again, I'll use 2 layers of clear glaze and making sure that it dries in between each layer. And once all the pieces are dry, I load them up in the kiln, and generally I put them on the top shelf. They don't take up a lot of space. This is only about half of the order, or not even. I actually did a whole lot of larger daisy earrings. I love the white speckled underglaze, which was the Northcote Pottery white speckle, and the pink also pops really nicely. The clay that I used was porcelain, so I think that that's why these colors are popping so beautifully, because it's quite a white clay. Thanks so much if you've made it through to the end. Stay tuned for the next video and make sure you subscribe.